Joining me for all the chat today, I'm delighted to say, is Philip Ingram MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, and better than that, he was also joined by his whole array of medals, which I insisted that he wore in the studio. A very good morning once again, Philip.
Good to be here.
I know I've made you do this before, but given that it is VE Day, 80th anniversary, I know he's too young and beautiful to have been able to have fought in the Second World War, but you've been in a number of other conflicts. Can you just talk us through very quickly, for those watching, a bit of a point, if you're not watching, you're missing on a treat here. We've got a whole array of medals, what they are for.
Yeah, well, I was born 20 years after the end of the Second World War, so yeah, it shocked me. That's the member of the Order of the British Empire, the cross, that's awarded by Her Majesty the Queen. Next to that is the General Service Medal 1962 with clasp Northern Ireland. Then we've got the United Nations Medal for Croatia and Bosnia, and then we've got the NATO medal for Bosnia, the NATO medal for Kosovo, and an unusual one, NATO medal for the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Very few people were deployed in that. Next to that I've got the Iraq medal, and then the Queen's Golden Jubilee medal.
Get him. Thank you for your service. Now, that's interesting because we talk about the end of war in Europe, but of course we had a number of wars in Europe. With former Yugoslavia in my lifetime. We've also got a war right now in Europe, in Ukraine, that is ongoing, and there's talk about us going as a peacekeeping force. Today is such an important day. We've had 4 days of celebrations. This is the final day marking this 80th anniversary. It's a very significant anniversary, I think, particularly because of the war in Ukraine, but also particularly because it's the last major sort of anniversary with a zero in it, big anniversaries which get more obviously attention, where it is likely we will have people who have served in that war still present. A lot of people have been talking about their memories, talking about his children being taken to Piccadilly Circus for the celebrations at that moment. And I just want to read again what Churchill had to say at the start of his radio broadcast all those years ago. Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m. at headquarters, General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe to the Allied Expeditionary Force and simultaneously to the Soviet High Command. This was life-changing, life-saving for so many millions of people around Europe. But of course the war in the Far East continued.
Yes.
VJ Day wasn't until August. Your thoughts on this day as a former serviceman yourself?
It's one that very, very poignant. When you get to the end of a conflict, you get the end of an operation. It almost feels like an anticlimax. It almost feels like a plug's been pulled out. The emotions just disappear.
So you're living on adrenaline for so long.
Exactly, and we've got a country that's been living on adrenaline, and that's why people have gone out to let their hair down. And some will have celebrated, some will have wanted to hide away because they will have known that their loved ones are not coming back. And whilst they see the joy in everyone else's faces, and they feel as if they should have that joy, they don't, because they have lost people very close to them, and it's a day therefore of so many different emotions all coming together. And
that's the thing, because lots of people will be looking back at grandfathers and fathers, great grandfathers who lost their lives, who sacrificed ultimately. And we were talking a little bit earlier, and I'd love to hear your reactions, your thoughts on this. And do give us a call, 0344 499 1000, to have your say. I'll give you more of the details in a moment, as if you don't know them already. Is that it is important that we live up to their legacy.
Yeah.
That we don't just say, oh, that was something that happened in the past, job done, thanks very much, really appreciate it, and then we just carry on day to day. It is so clear to me, whether it's over lockdown, whether it's freedom of speech on anything and everything. I mean, even the trans madness, comes into this. Every conversation's about immigration, every conversation we have, Brexit, everything. That it all comes down to the ability of people to speak freely, to debate, to criticise the government, to criticise the state, to criticise church, monarchy, to have open debate, to be able to live under the rule of law. All of these things, they have to be fought for whether in the trenches or just day to day in the courts or in Parliament, they have to be fought for by every new generation, don't they?
They do, and people, you have to recognise the reality. The reality of living through total war, the reality that it was one person that started this, Hitler, with what he's built up as his regime. We've got dictators like Hitler with Vladimir Putin and others around the world that could easily start wars. And therefore, whenever the government is asking for people to pay a little bit of extra tax or more money to be allocated to defence to stop us getting into that position again. I've been involved in wars in Europe through former Yugoslavia. As you said, we've got a war in Europe between Ukraine and Russia. That could easily bubble over and turn into a total war again. We don't want that, and therefore it's recognising that, it's remembering it, it's remembering the detail and the horrors.
And remembering also the US President who pointed out the best way of avoiding war is speak softly and carry a big stick. We need to improve our stick. If there's any day-to-day want an announcement on spending money on defence, and it's got to actually be spent on the right stuff. I don't really care what the amount is. What do we need to protect ourselves? And we've had that, that terror threat, which it looks like it was on the Israeli embassy. That has been sort of unofficially confirmed. The Iranian suspects, one believed to be very close to the Iranian regime. We've got the threat from Russia. I mean, yes, they're not going to roll tanks over the sea. Of course they're not. But a real, genuine threat, certainly a threat to the Baltics. Certainly the Finnish and the Swedes think they're a threat. That's why they've joined NATO in the last few years, and certainly the Poles and others recognise that threat. They've lived under Russian rule. They know what that means. So many people want to put their head in the sands and to say, no, not our problem. It's not our war. Well, neither was Sudetenland until it became our war. Exactly. And that's the reality.
And we are a global entity. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We are one of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. We have global reach and global trade. We've got global interests with sovereign territories based around the world. And therefore, I'm sorry, the conflicts that are happening around the world are of interest to us. They directly impact us. Look at the impact that there was in the energy prices whenever Russia attacked Ukraine. It hurt us in the pocket. So anyone who says it's nothing to do with us and we should withdraw is very, very naive.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. As I say, the number to ring is 0344 499 1000. What are your thoughts and memories on this day? And indeed the significance not just of what men and women did at home and on our fighting forces to get this victory. But what we should learn from that today, and particularly, I was saying earlier, I'm horrified by the number of young people who say this country isn't worth fighting for. Well, if you tell young people for a generation that their country has done nothing but wrong and ill in the world and is responsible for everything that's ever gone wrong in the world, of course they won't think the country's worth fighting for. Our country is worth fighting for. There's a reason why people are getting on rickety boats to come across the channel to be here. That's the reason why, because actually we're not perfect, but we're not bad. But we're not bad. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at TalkTV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Free on YouTube, free of course on X. Can't wait to get to more of your messages. Also, let's talk about this trade deal. US trade deal looking likely. We're told by the US president in the latest post on Truth Social, this should be a very big and exciting day. I don't know how big and exciting trade deals are. It sounds like it's going to be sort of rather smaller than the big all-encompassing trade deal that the British government, whether Tory or Labour, have been trying to get. But if it can at least roll back those 25% tariffs on cars and aluminium and steel, that would be a good start, wouldn't it?
It'll help enormously. Our car industry has been hard hit by the impact on exports to the United States. To the point where Jaguar Land Rover at one stage stopped its exports until they could really understand what's going on. But it's
also presumably in the hope that these tariffs would kind of disappear again in a few weeks.
Exactly.
Which they kind of, other tariffs did.
Other tariffs did, and this is where Donald Trump is using this to create political capital for him around. We have to see what we've given him in getting this rolled back. We have to see exactly how much it's rolled back to. He might just bring it back to 10% and just have a flat 10% across the board. I don't think they're going to disappear completely.
No, exactly. We may well still keep that. Of course, the usual nonsense about chlorinated chicken and selling off our NHS. I mean, really?
Yeah, but people just... They're headlines. We've got sound bites. And the trouble is the sound bites are coming out of some senior politicians. And they should realise that this is wrong. The sound bites that we're going to privatise the NHS. Well, I hate to tell you, folks, that the whole of the primary care in NHS is private.
Yes, GPs are private. Well, also, I've had a number of the older relatives who've been having, cataract operations over the last few years, largely, through the NHS. Yeah. Wait, and then you're sent to a private unit.
And the NHS is not about who pays for the doctors and nurses, who pays for the hospital building, and what the body is that does that. It's about getting care at the point of need for free, because also, you've already paid for it.
I did think it was fascinating. There's the talk about reform and doing so well in the elections last week, and then particularly Labour saying, this is a party, they want to sell off, privatise the NHS. I just don't think that's the threat they think it is anymore. They want to have a social insurance system, like in Europe. What? Where they don't have waiting lists like we have, where they get really good quality care, and if you've got cancer, heart disease, diabetes, you'll live about 5 years longer.
Yes.
Yeah, how awful. Oh, let me cry at the thought of that. I mean, they're living in a fantasy land, they really are. And again, no one's going to buy the NHS because we don't want it, and frankly, if they want to buy it, off you go. Anyway, let's talk about the latest immigration stories as well, because these figures are absolutely astonishing. These latest figures on the staggering cost of Britain's asylum problem, it's released by a National Audit Office report, so it's not a political party saying it. These are the people who number crunch. They know their numbers. The original forecast for the cost of housing asylum seekers, so hotels largely, about 3/4 in hotels, again, bearing in mind that Labour was going to get rid of the hotels, that's working out well. And also other accommodation. It was forecast to be £4.5 billion back in 2019 for the next decade. Still a huge sum over the decade. Now that prediction in total over that decade, 2029, is over 15 billion quid. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be more than that.
Oh, yes.
We are spending a huge amount of money. There's a huge amount of profit being made by the three companies. They are Serco, Clear Springs Ready Homes and Mears Group, who are basically supplying this accommodation. They're making so much profit, they're even paying, double the normal rates that hotels get and that private landlords get to get accommodation. This is £4.5 million a day it's costing us, £3,000 a minute, and there's no prospect in sight that these numbers will go down. Those gangs ain't smashed. No prospect in sight these people will be, even if they get speeded up in terms of the asylum approval or disapproval, system, that they won't carry on appeal after appeal. Even if we decide you can stay, or even if we decide that you can't stay, they're not going to leave the country. We're still going to be paying for them.
Well, and that number, eye-watering number, is just the hotels. We're paying for all the legal costs to go through everything. We're paying for them to go and go through the NHS. We're giving them pocket money. We're paying to feed them. We're paying to give them driving lessons. We're paying to give them internet access and everything else. And we're getting nothing back. That 15 billion is a drop in the...
Apart from when we let them work, they're not allowed to work currently, but when they're off the asylum system and they're allowed to work, and then we find out they're all first-class engineers and doctors.
Who have to claim benefits.
And you have to claim benefits. Genuinely, it's absolute madness. Germany, it seems, has woken up to a certain extent. I think this is absolutely fascinating. I haven't seen this in the British media yet, but yesterday, the new German government, again, it's a wishy-washy wet government. It's a Labour-Tory coalition with a Tory, effectively a Tory Chancellor in Friedrich Merz. They revoked the instruction that went out from Angela Merkel back in 2015, which this is what it said. Third country nationals, i.e. anyone who turns up on your border, without documents, most of our lot who come on the boats, legitimising residence, so documents legitimising you've got no right to be here or saying where you are from, and with a request for asylum, must be allowed entry. Well, they got 1 million people that year, 3 million in total. It overrode this idea that you had to claim asylum in the first European country or safe country you got to. Basically, doors were open, everyone came in, it's worked out absolutely awfully for the German people and indeed the German political class, which is why the AfD are doing so well. They have rescinded that. And basically the rule is now, the default is you don't allow those people to enter. If you haven't got a passport, or you haven't got a right to be here, you haven't got a visa, you ain't coming in. Now, the domino effects of that on Austria and other neighbouring countries will mean that they're going to have to keep those people, or they may do the sensible thing and say, no, you're not coming into our country first. Could this, Philip, could this be the beginning of the end of the madness?
Well, it should be, and it's good to see Germany taking the initiative. It's a shame that the UK is not leading, because you were outside Europe and we could do that. Mark Littlewood made a very good point earlier when he turned around and said, instead of the burden of proof being on us to try and disprove.
Yeah. You're not at risk of being tortured.
Exactly. It should be on the asylum seekers to prove that they are who they say they are, and they are, to prove that they're at risk. And if they can't do it, get rid.
Yeah, but even again, when they appeal, and it's utter nonsense, and we've seen a case after case, virtually a new one every day, of the utter nonsense that they're allowed to claim. Chicken nuggets, a paedophile allowed to have a family life with kids he's not even allowed to see unsupervised because he's a paedophile, but being allowed to stay in the country.
Exactly, and look at Rwanda. That was a cheap solution as compared to what
it would only have been cheap if we sent everyone there. Yeah. I've always said, in principle was right, the right of the government to change the law, and I just don't think human rights lawyers should be in charge of everything in this country. I don't remember electing them. Unfortunately, apparently people did elect a human rights lawyer in Keir Starmer. Would they go so far as this? Well, no, because it's Bleeding Heart and all these people, all these poor people, all these apparently young 23-year-old men from various countries in Africa and the Middle East apparently are the most deserving causes for asylum here. It's an abject nonsense, and it makes such a mockery.
Yeah, well, clearly the education the countries they come from is superb, because they're all consultant brain surgeons.
Yeah, well, indeed. But of course, now we're told that the solution next week is going to be cracking down. People are going to be required to speak a higher level of. This is the point when I'm not going to be able to speak English myself, obviously. About speaking more fluent English, and writing it as well. So we're looking at more A-level standard than GCSE standard. I mean, most Brits can't manage A-level standard English, so we'll see how that goes. But it's unclear to me from the leak, I think, because again, we don't know the full story and whether this is going to happen. Is this for people arriving here, or is it also for people who are currently here and don't yet have indefinite leave to remain? And by the way, why are we giving all these people a right to stay here who can't speak English?
And the bill that the NHS is currently paying, that local police are currently paying for interpreters, because everyone comes in and says that they can't speak English and therefore get interpreters in to do everything.
Not a single interpreter, that's my rule.
Well, exactly.
Find a charity to pay for it.
It takes a GP to deal with someone with an interpreter 2 sessions to do the same thing that they do with someone who can speak English.
That's why you're not getting an appointment.
That's why you're not getting an appointment.
Simple. It is. Yeah, it is a massive.
Simple math.
It's certainly around my way. It really is a massive issue. And again, I don't even care if you're here legally. I still think you speak English. I would not go and live in a foreign country and expect everyone to speak. I mean, other than you're sort of in a tourist hotel, and you. But I was in Italy at the weekend, and I would just say, parlo inglese, grazie. I'd say, I'm just saying. You say, I'm so sorry, my Italian's not very good, but I certainly would try and speak the basics. But I'm only here for the weekend, spending money. If I'm planning to make my life there, I'd be fluent in Italian.
Yes. Yeah, and you need to be. In different countries around Europe, you cannot survive unless you're fluent. I know a lot of people that live in different countries across Europe, and they say exactly the same. You have to be fluent in the language.
Uno Aperol Spritz, I find, is very easy to translate. That's just me. Right, I do want to hear from you on this issue as well, this £4 million a day on hotels for asylum seekers, but we're going to demand all migrants speak fluent English to stay in Britain. Do you think they'll actually follow through with that? I just don't see it. I can't think of a single thing that any government has said they're going to do of any political hue that they've ever actually done.
Smash the gangs? Oh, no.
They genuinely do the opposite.